All right, I think we're up and running.
Cool. So it's on YouTube and Facebook. Huh?
Yes.
Terrific. Great. So I'm assuming as the gallery director, you'll do an introduction of some sort, or that's not so.
There we go. Now I have to go back to my screen. There we go. So.
Well, it's not 7 yet, so we'll
Right.
or two, just an opportunity to jump in. Great. So did it take you, did you work till midnight that night? I was trying to save you.
Oh, no, it was okay. It was okay. I stayed late. Yes. That's all right. It's what we do. It's a pleasure.
Once you get into it, you don't want to, you're committed. You don't want to leave. All right. Got my bottle of water.
Well, we're up on Facebook right now. We're up live on Facebook. So.
Facebook. Okay. Great.
So if you are not wearing anything below the waist, now would not be the time to stand up.
I think I'm okay.
Okay. Good.
Right.
I know Olbris is okay. I know he's.
I'm
fine.
good. I'm good. Yeah.
Oh, he's good. I'm good, man. I'm good. Yeah. He's like.
I'm sitting in space. So from the zero gravity, who knows? Okay, so we're live, I guess.
Yes, we are. We are live. We're very live. I'm just going to wait a couple more minutes and then.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I don't want to start talking yet. Give some people an opportunity to join in. I have to do this with my students all the time too. Okay, guys, a few more minutes. Connection problem. It used to be a traffic problem. Now it's a connection problem.
All right.
Okay.
Let's do this. Welcome to Gallery Bergen on Facebook Live and on YouTube. We're very, very excited to be live-ish with artist Gianluca Bianchino and philosopher extraordinaire Kevin Olbris, a colleague of mine from Bergen, from BCC. And what you see in the background is a video recording that we made of Gianluca's installation that's called An Attempt to Communicate with Reality. Actually, I had to clarify that with Gianluca because I left out the attempt part and he corrected me to make sure that we call it an attempt to communicate with reality because we're not sure whether we'll succeed or not. So we're going to leave that to you, our audience, to discover, for yourselves and to communicate to us whether there's been a successful communication with reality. But I'm just going to quickly give you a background about this piece. This piece has an actual geophysical presence in Gallery Bergen on the 3rd floor of West Hall at Bergen Community College. The West Hall had been closed since the pandemic began, since last March. And the college gave us, I'm going to stop this video here just to cool out on the noise background a little bit. The college gave us permission to come in and create an installation. It was a little odd because the building had been vacant for so long, and it was like you were waiting to see tumbleweeds, going down the hallways. It's like, it sort of had the whole campus had that sort of air to it of like, is this still a school? I'm not sure. And it actually had been commandeered by FEMA and then the county of Bergen for doing COVID testing. So that's really what West Hall's use had been up until Gianluca and I reactivated the space, and he created this really brilliant installation on the walls in the half of the gallery. And we conceived of this as a way to explore this strange, I think, momentous, precipitous time that we're in, where the COVID pandemic has pushed us all into the uncanny valley, that region between the android that you think might be human, but you're not quite sure, and you feel this cognitive dissonance between what you see and what you're experiencing. It's not really quite real, but we're not sure. All of us have been thrust headlong into this realm of the virtual, and we wanted to explore that in art. I think this is what art really does well, is to imagine futures that those who exist cannot possibly see without themselves in it. So it has a progressive and revolutionary impetus to it, but it also helps us wrestle with complex concepts of reality that sometimes escape words and escape sometimes even our notice. So we wanted to do this. I thought of Gianluca immediately because of his whole history of creating site-specific sculptures similar to this, that are, some of them are based on reference space junk, derelict satellites in orbit around the Earth and their decaying orbits, headed for their demise in the upper atmosphere, some still blinking and sending back signals to home base, some like Voyager on the outer edges of the galaxy, communicating with who knows where for who knows how long. And there's this interesting sense of fragility and loneliness and sort of this ephemeral feel to it that I think is exquisite. And I think Gianluca's sculptures really capture all of that. And it's something that touches, I think, on all of us who are experiencing this weird thing of being in these virtual spaces under COVID. And what we're going to do tonight is introduce you to this installation that Gianluca has created. And we're also going to introduce you to a way in which we've attempted to bridge that uncanny valley with some new VR technology that we've used. It's a 3D VR camera that creates a navigable interactive space. And we've been able to overlay videos and text and other things on top of this. And it's all on our website. If you want to take a look at it, it's gallerybergen.art, https://gallerybergen.art. And that's where this website is living. What you see in the background, again, is a video, and you'll see that you can navigate this space through this platform. And of course, this is technology also because the links don't work. But here's Gianluca in the background contemplating his creation. This is right after it was finalized. I'll go back to that link in just a second. But this is Gianluca right after this was finished and the projections were happening and being created. And let me see, I think I'll go back to the first page here. I think we can get back into this. Here we go. I'm not a complete moron, not a complete technological moron, just, I'm old, man, what can I tell you? But I hope that you can see this, because here we are in Gallery Bergen. And in fact, if you want to sign in, you can do that in our space here. You can sign the guest book and say nice things to Gianluca and Kevin. You can say bad things to me, but you only can talk about nice things with the two of them. So make sure when you visit our model here online that you come in and visit. And we have two sculptures here, actually three. These sculptures are from our previous exhibition, what was called Ornithology, by the sculptor from Monaco named Caroline Bergonzi. And she's in Monaco now, weathering the storm of COVID. She left us these sculptures, and I thought we could just have them continue to occupy the gallery here, this part of it, while Gianluca, Hey, get out of there. While Gianluca took over the other half of the gallery. So we can walk through this space to different vantage points, and you'll notice that the colors will change. That's because what's going on in the background here is a live projection. So as our VR camera recorded each of these viewpoints, this was what was coming through the projector. So if you want to see the projections, then you just go to this meta tag here and you can see the videos for yourself with the sound. If you'd like to see what projectors say to each other at night, you can go to these tags here and discover those for yourself as well. You can find out what projectors say to each other. A lot of us wonder that. That's something I lie awake at night thinking about, is when I'm not in the gallery, what are the projectors saying to each other? But now you'll find out. Now you'll know.
Yeah. Well, and also those will, I think, show just the video. So
yeah,
we're able to see the video art piece.
Exactly.
Not in this projection mapping capacity, let's say, just for what it is. So you get good audio. I just want to take a minute to
please do
really thank the two people that collaborated with me on this project. Musician Brian Lawler, based in Jersey City, great musician and sound engineer. We had created the bass for this audio track on a previous piece that I did at New Jersey City University close to 2 years ago, which was called An Attempt to Communicate with the Sky. In that the format of the gallery was a little bit different. There was a cutout in the ceiling that led to a skylight. And so it was almost like this homage of this struggle by these tripods and these projectors to reach above. So I used that audio track again this time. I futzed with it a little bit myself, and I added the spoken word component. And I wanted, in order to make these robots sexless, let's say, I used a veil voice, my own, and then artist Lauren Bergendaway lent her voice for another track. So it's a conflation of the two. And she did a terrific job. I gave her little or no instructions. I told her, just dehumanize yourself as best as you can and just read it and record it. And she did it in one take. It was really fantastic. I was able to work with it. So there are different projectors with different audio tracks. And in the gallery, obviously, there's a kind of cloud of echoes between what seems to be a male voice that's somewhat detached and maybe robotic, and what seems to be a female voice. But obviously, if you're listening to a video recording of the live projection, then you might hear a lot of white noise and echoes. So I think the videos that you uploaded allow the viewer also to listen to a clean audio track and see how the master video projection was created, which I think of them as works in themselves, because installation, to me, has naturally become a way not to make one sort of statement. It's like a menagerie of different things. So, like, what could this installation that's going to be up, that's ephemeral, what could it actually produce? Since there's video involved and there's photography involved, and it produces also photography, it produces videos, it produces new sections or components for yet another work that is yet to be realized. So in themselves, they're never really static. We're seeing it in this state now, but as you know, I'm going to come back to the gallery and mess around with it again. So there there might be other iterations, other variants, kind of like COVID. There's variants. So this installation is going to have different variants depending on the time of the week, I guess. So yeah,
right. We were just
Brian Lawler and Lauren Bergendaway, thank you so much. They're tuned in. Really appreciate the effort and the collaboration especially. So.
Oh, we had such a great time with this. Just for people's knowledge, I just wanted to point out that I'll go to my point of view here. If you're interested in the different voicings with the videos, the Lauren's voice is on this right-hand channel on the right-hand side, and Gianluca's is over here on the left-hand side. So you can hear the two different voices behind the videos that are creating the entire projection here. So that we have sort of a channel effect, at least with the videos. The other thing that we added, just to make it interesting, is that here we have this was when we first started out. This was when Gianluca first started to set it up. There's an interview there with the sort of a in process interrogation on my part, asking, what the hell do you think you're doing? It's like, what is this about anyway?
That was my site visit when I came with a few props just to get the lay of the land.
Right.
And then you forced this interview on me. It went well, I'm glad. So.
I thought it went very well. It went swimmingly well.
Yeah, and it's I've been enjoying the really dramatic vantage points. For example, when you're coasting the far wall and you're able to see the installation from like an odd angle, and it kind of takes on a different shape. And I've taken some photographs also of it from those vantage points. So it sort of obliterates the general sense of the architecture of the space, and maybe gives it even more of a sense that you're sort of in deep space.
Well, this is the really amazing part. I just have to speak for this technology is really quite extraordinary. Is that one of the things that's difficult to get to do, when I describe this space to other artists who are coming in to work in our gallery, I try to describe the atrium nature of the place and all of its really interesting facets, and it's very difficult to do with a just a verbal description or a floor plan. But with this, you can really see we have a world-class art presentation space at our school. I just thought, I just have to say, I've seen a lot of college art spaces and a lot of private galleries, and I think Bergen's holds up with the best of them. I think this is a really wonderful space to show art, and I'm glad to have this tool to demonstrate to folks just how gorgeous and really sophisticated it is. So
yeah, when I first walked in, I looked at the gallery and I said, how did I miss this place? It's really terrific. It's a good layout for show, and you have this we can't see it now, but those windows bring in some really beautiful natural light that actually lends itself really well to sculpture.
Right.
Not so much to my piece, which is tucked sort of beneath the windows, so we can kind of escape the natural light a bit. But generally speaking, yeah, I think it's a beautiful place.
Exactly. So I'm going to just introduce now more faces of people. I really love what you've got going on in the background there, and superimposed over your face, Gianluca, because this completely fits our theme for the evening, which is this interplay, this nexus that we are at between the real and the virtual. Exactly what your sculptures are.
I wanted to make it look like I had broken into the gallery and bypassed COVID laws, but there's appearance that's selling me out, unfortunately.
Is he real? Is he virtual? It reminds me of a TV show that was on, I think it was in the late 80s, early 90s, called Max Headroom. I don't know if you remember that, but it's sort of, you're too young. You were in 7th grade probably, right? When
had something similar. I have to say that I'm glad you brought up the 80s, because the funny thing about technology in my work is that I tend to be a bit retro, in the sense that a lot of this work is made with very accessible technology that's been laying around, things that are being almost on the verge of being discarded. I don't want a 3D camera unless you're using it to map it out, but you'll never see the latest technology in this work. So, and I think maybe it helps some even somewhat unintentionally to create a kind of vintage idea of space because there's still the fantasy of space exploration from the 50s haunts us a little bit. What was that all about? How do we relate to it now? And the politics of space exploration, the potential for it being a new paradigm of colonization, which I think is not. It's talked about, but not on a mainstream level. So as a space enthusiast, I'm always squinting an eye at what will be the classism or sort of slavery of the future look like. As a result of what we're going to colonize and who's going to do the dirty work. So I just thought I'd interject.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's something that I really enjoy about your work is that it does evoke that nostalgia, which, for me, I grew up, with the space race. This was, that was my generation, my era. Yes, I am that old. But it was, so it is evocative that I think there's a resurfacing of that nostalgia, for when, the United States was this rising superpower and this sort of manifestation of technological prowess that was happening. And these structures do look sort of like on the edge of a little antiquated. They're fragile. They're gossamer. They're vulnerable. Some of them are a little broken. They're sort of frozen in their sort of distorted, broken shape in space. And they communicate more this fragility and sort of this ephemeral character, which sort of flies in the face of when we think of technology, we think of like the enduring, might of science, but instead it sort of connotes this almost like lonely, these little broken aluminum butterflies floating around in space that will perish, when they re-enter the Earth's orbit at some point. And even the satellites that are up there for the express purpose of guiding nuclear missiles to their destination, even those little satellites are these gossamer, ephemeral little beings that will eventually perish as well. And I think you really grab that for us, and it's it really is something that makes you consider that whole enterprise on multiple levels. I wanted to invite Kevin Olbries is someone I invited on to talk about also this whole aspect of this cusp that we seem to be on of the real and the virtual. Kevin, tell us about this historical conundrum for humanity.
Well, yeah, thanks. And thanks so much for inviting me on, Tim.
Absolutely.
It's great to be here. And it's great to see your art, Gianluca, and hear you talk about it. And I especially am intrigued. Before I start talking about reality in any way, I think I'm especially intrigued by what you just said about space and about what Tim was saying about vulnerability. Because I kind of could see something like the light sails that are used, that are, or at least theoretically going to be used in space exploration. And of course, one of the concerns about them is that while they're such an amazing piece of technology, they're incredibly fragile, right? And one of the amazing things about space exploration is that the littlest thing can cause so much change and so much harm, and sort of and so the fragility and the care that's required for something like that is something that I always think about, and I thought about light sails when I saw the umbrella-like structures in your sculpture, which I thought was really great.
I think maybe in some ways I try to connect that fragility to the human body. So there's
Yeah.
maybe an attempt there to sort of reference the body,
Yeah.
and the fragility of the body also in space. The body's already fragile here on Earth, let alone up in space. And then
Yes.
with that, I think comes a sense of melancholy, um, and but nonetheless, if you're up in space, the first thing you're going to try to do probably is try to communicate with some other entity that can understand you.
Yes.
So yeah, so that's where that fragility I think maybe comes from.
Oh, that's
Um,
wonderful.
yeah, we can't build. I don't know that we can build heavy structures. We have to find really light materials to build things in space. So, and I think there's something great about that if we can achieve that. Create light structures that can resist space weather, let's say, you know. In some ways, that might influence maybe some of the constructions we might make here on Earth. I mean, space exploration has led to all sorts of technological innovation here. So often you hear the argument, why should we be exploring space at a time when there's wars back on Earth? There's always wars back on Earth. I mean, it's not like one's going to stop, for a while so that we could all devote ourselves to the human intellect. They're just going to keep going. So, but things in the realm of, medicine, surgery have benefited so much from space technology and space exploration. Um, so the lighter the better. I know the space elevator is still sort of a thing. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
I have, yeah.
Sort of this myth, and it had a strong preference in the 70s, I think, and it got rebooted a few times. So there's the potential for having a space elevator one day, which will require very light but super strong cable made out of some kind of carbon something.
Yeah.
We like to spit out words that scientists and engineers come up with without knowing what the hell they actually do.
Right.
How they're really made, but
Right.
sounds great. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And do I understand rightly that the elements of your sculpture are in some ways playing off of one another? That there's some parts that are picking up on what other parts of the sculpture are doing. Is that right?
Yeah. So this installation is an outgrowth of other installations, and I think installation to me is not that much different than, let's say, painting. You start a painting with a basic idea, and if you don't restrict yourself too much, and you allow the painting to, and the medium to take you somewhere, then you discover other things. So it's almost as if, against my own will, these structures that create ultimately the visual field are becoming a little bit more conscious or intelligent. They used to be very rudimentary. There was no sound in the beginning. Sound was something that I would add later with like video effects, to create a kind of presentation of the work. Now there's a sound element. I think I resisted the sound element because I didn't want good speakers. I didn't want high-end technology. A lot of these projectors are kind of crappy, actually. The two main projectors are old. They're not HD. One of them, the image is actually misaligned. I'm like, perfect. I'm not here to do projection mapping. I'm actually here to misalign projection mapping. I'm very much influenced by Cubism, but not just as an aesthetic of lines and overlapping shapes, but as a kind of multidimensional way of thinking about space.
Yeah.
So I noticed in my last installation that one of the projectors actually emanated a sound, and it was really terrible. I thought, this is great. This projector has its own speaker. All right, it was really timbery, and I said, I want to work with that, but maybe I need more.
Yeah.
More projectors. So when Tim reached out, I said, can you buy me like 4 new projectors? we need 4 speakers that are not, are not external. I want the thing itself to have its own, not a soul, but maybe it's searching for a soul. So they are communicating with one another through a language that is quasi-human. They're using human language, but they're not able to articulate the clarity of a human paragraph, like a sentence structure. So that's it's almost like it's my own version of code, let's say.
Yeah.
But that they should speak some code, but I don't understand code. I'm not a digital guy, really. I mean, I'm digital enough to teach digital art, but I'm not a technology artist. And I want to make that clear because recently, I think somebody reached out about me and technology, and I think they misconstrued me as a technology artist. I think I'm more someone who comments on technology. I'm not necessarily dying to learn the newest technological form of art. The installations have a way of telling me, hey, now you need sound. Now you got to figure out some sound, and it's generally not going to be a high-tech endeavor. It's actually going to be kind of low budget. So if you're throwing out a projector that is barely running on fumes, and if it's releasing actual smoke, like it's like I'm about to burn out, just I'll come and pick it up. By that Craigslist experience. So that sort of expired technology, once again, makes them a little more human to me, and makes them a little bit more fragile. And inevitably, somehow, no matter how bad or how wretched the technology is, I've been really amazed at the color results that I'm getting. And there's a lot of effort in creating contrast with shadows and highlights. To me, it's ultimately still a painting. It lives somewhere between a relief sculpture and a painting that's actually moving through time and space.
Yeah.
More than a technology piece,
Yeah. So I think that Tim had wanted me to talk a little bit about sort of reality and virtual reality, and one of the things that I find striking and that the sculpture evokes for me philosophically is the fact that so there's this group of philosophers who work in what's called social epistemology, and they like to study the way that human beings create systems of knowledge communally, because no one is conscious alone. No, there's no island of consciousness, that we're all kind of connected to one another in these fundamental ways. And I kind of see that in some ways here, that there not only are they kind of communicating with you and communicating with one another, there's a kind of social creation taking place. Which I find, in terms of the theme that Tim was talking to me about, talking about virtual reality and reality, and the way that we are connecting right now, the way that we're talking to one another at a distance, right? And there is, I think, in some ways, something unique and special about it, the way that we can communicate like this. But it's also, in many ways, it's very classic. It's the way that we've always kind of done it. I mean, we are speaking to one another. I can see your faces. I can hear you. The ideas that you have presented to me are generating something internal, in me. And hopefully my words are not just sounding confused and strange, but are actually generating some sort of thought inside of you, and just a little strange. And so there is this kind of social connection, however sometimes fragmented and imperfect that it can be, which is something obviously that's incredibly valuable, and it's also unique and interesting to live through, and also at times terrifying. And so all of those elements are kind of gathered together in it. But it also has within it a special kind of threat, right? Because one of the concerns that we might have is that socially we're constructing a version of reality that maybe is very different from what the real world is, in a sense. And how do we have a kind of connection? How do we make sure that our communal sense of reality is something at least close to accurate? So there's always also this kind of threat to the whole system. And we can certainly see that politically these days when we think about the differences in terms of what different groups think is real. So there is a sense in which we're always creating because we're subjects who are always being made by our experiences. And yet there's also something out there that's real that we attempt to reach. So that's something that that struck me, and that I guess initially as I was thinking about it, that's what came to mind. But I'll sort of leave that out there. I feel already like I've talked quite a bit.
No, I think it's a valid point, and I feel that with technology, if we didn't have oppressive systems trying to take over these platforms, let's say, then technology would be a bit like science. It would be over time, it would be a self-correcting system. So the idea that we're using these technologies to communicate, and at first they're quirky, and some people are going to complain, well, so what? We can fix that over time. We can get better at communicating. We want to communicate. Nothing is to say that this version of our system of communication is totally artificial. It may well be organic, and it's just going through a process of, it's being leveraged, it's being tested, it's being made better. So I find myself to be I'm a fan of social media, for example, even though I'm not particularly enthusiastic about how social media is used. I had some Italian artists that were very old school when they came here to the US. They said, oh, everybody's doing everything on Facebook, and they're posting all of their work on Facebook, and they're giving it away, and everybody's got an opinion. And I said, yes, it's terrible that, it's allowing a lot of idiotic opinions to sort of thrive. But at the same time, I thought about something kind of interesting. When I was here in the US as a teenager, I realized that, and that this is an observation from somebody who's Italian, who's used to hanging out in piazzas, having a lot of free time as a teenager and as a young adult, as a child, and I realized that a lot of the activities here were always monitored. It was either some after-school activity or activities done at work. I said, what about hanging out in the street corner? Oh, that's bad, because that's where you become a drug addict and you wind up in a gang and stuff like that. It's like the street corner is bad. There's no public spaces. The parks are great, but a lot of times they're empty. So how are Americans talking about stuff? How are they talking about politics on the whim? How are they communicating beyond just things that are surveilled by a large institution where some things you can say and some things you can't? So I think social media allowed for that conversation to actually pop, for Americans to have a European type of piazza. And it created a kind of broad sort of social system. And it got out of hand, I think, not because, people are talking, but because there's mechanisms of control that have entered these platforms. So I think the problem with technology is not technology itself, is, how it's being implemented and what is the ultimate goal from the institutions that allow it to exist. So I think those are the fundamental questions that I ask. The thing itself, as an artist that's looking for archaic technology, doesn't mean I hate new technology. I love new technology, but I'm going to let Tim for now play with the 3D camera. I'm still going to work with the crappy little $100 projector and try to get the best out of it. So that's sort of how I feel about it. I think we could build a really terrific language with these systems if we're allowed to use them freely.
Yeah. One thing that somewhat concerns me, or that I'm also interested in as both an artist and as a person interested in theory, is like what happens when the phone goes off the hook. It's like, well, what happens when a new technology is introduced that completely changes that thing that Kevin was talking about before, that social experience of a shared reality, that social consciousness, that consciousness that we create together. And technologies have the power to alter that. The first, the most profound one in the art world that was transformative was 1839. Joseph Nicephore Niepce and Louis Daguerre invent this thing called photography. And it didn't just change, how reality was sort of preserved on a two-dimensional picture plane. It wasn't just about like making pictures in a different way. It changed so many different fields across the board. It changed even the way that we think the brain works. It changed our models for perception. It changed our model of cognition, of memory. I think all wrong, actually. I mean, I think most of those sciences and discoveries are completely wrong. They use the camera as the model for how the brain works, and they're still trying to undo that to this day. But it completely changed how artists looked at the world. It changed not just how artists looked at the world, but how all of us sort of perceive things through what you would call a camera vision. And we started to think of the act of seeing as something that needed to be archived or preserved, or that we would take these visual snapshots. All the words that came into our vernacular about seeing and perceiving the world, it's now defined the way that we look, that define the way that we think. And I really believe at this point that we are on the cusp of a very similar 1839 moment, and COVID is dragging us into this, many of us kicking and screaming. But I think that as we are being brought into the realm of the virtual, I think art will never be the same. I think we're already seeing that as the art markets start to adjust to the ideas of NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and how to commercialize, monetize, and sell digital artworks. It's already starting to catch up on that level. But I think that those of us who are now entering like virtual Gallery Bergen are going to be entering many, many more spaces like that. And I know friends who are doing rave concerts and selling merchandise on Minecraft, doing it in a virtual space, interacting with avatars and living in a way that was only projected through novels and some advanced films 20 years ago. I think our consciousness is on the cusp of being reformed around this strange idea of the virtual once again. And I think Gianluca's work is referencing that in its sort of nostalgia for a time when that technology of like that took us to the freaking moon is looking quaint. It's looking like Model T shit. It's like, but Kevin, what is, I'm sure that you're probably working with some or seeing some things in writing these days of people who are investigating some of these things.
Well, yes, I think it's true. And I think it's important to see these kind of revolutionary moments. And yet in some other ways, the way that perhaps that we're communicating virtually right now, there's something very classic about it. So, Plato wrote a dialogue in which kind of underscores the dangers of something that actually Gianluca was just talking about as being one of the real goods of this medium of communication, which is where it should be like free and open, right? And he writes this dialogue in which there are these, like, it's called the Euthydemus, and there are these characters in there who just who argue gleefully nonsense, right? They love their nonsense, and they love that the power that their nonsense can give them. And I think that this medium of communication.
Let me think. What does that remind me of?
Right. Not to mention any particular contemporary political but there are plenty of people who still employ, I think, in very much the classic ways. So always this kind of threat. What the fever of democracy is being challenged by what's real, right? Because if we are all we are all able to do this communication, we are all able to put out our ideas there, then we all have to suffer the CAD, the nonsense spinner, but also the honest disagreement and the genuine concern. And in all of the ways that we human beings have always struggled to communicate with one another and to come together, are in some ways exactly what we're looking at. And so as much as things do change and there are these fundamental shifts, there are also these norms that just seem very familiar.
So you're saying I'm completely wrong then?
No, I'm saying you're right. I'm saying that we should always balance.
It's like, I completely agree, but you're completely wrong.
No, I'm saying that there are these fundamental differences, but there are also these great similarities that we should always sort of, and it's great to sort of keep track of both of them and the ways that they.
Yeah, well, you know, the difference I would say right now is that this technology is immediately accessible to everyone. I mean, you have, you know, people living in the slums of Johannesburg or Rio de Janeiro. You know, roofs are leaking made of cardboard, and they have iPhones and Mercedes parked outside. At the time of the invention of the photo camera, for example, the photo camera itself was not necessarily available to everybody. What it produced, it allowed for more merchants to have, you know, beautiful photographs taken of themselves, so they didn't have to pay a painter a ton of money. So it allowed for distribution of material among the masses, but not necessarily the use of that medium, you know, which took a little while for people to have. It's like the 60s and 70s becomes the time when, you know, that everybody had a photo camera. We start seeing all those pictures of those old movies taken at home. But again, you're not sharing it immediately. It's something that stays in your home. Somebody visits you, they see that documentation. Now, I think we're in the realm of the Terminator camera lens, where it records and it has information uploading at the same time. So it's like a very multi-dimensional way of existing, and it's available to everybody. You know, like the whole world is in on it. So I think we're still trying to settle, trying to understand what our place within this new technology ecosystem, communication, actually is. And it could be a little while before the dust actually settles. So right now it's like, you know, there's a little bit of chaos. You know, social media paradigm is very ego driven. It's funny because a friend of me and my friend were sort of making fun of the fact that, you know, doesn't it look like on social media everybody is an A personality, is an alpha? What happened to the introverts that used to balance us out? You know, like you know, on social media they're not introverts because everybody's competing for the same level of attention. And so there's this bubble that's constantly, you know, inflating and inflating. I think it hasn't actually popped yet. We'll have to see the consequences of when it actually pops and how we settle after that, and what we make of this in a constructive way. You know? We're
going to find out the introverts are all on MySpace and have been all along. We've been plotting our overthrow and demise ever since. We're going to be shocked to find out that they've been using AOL and MySpace to overtake everyone. Damn introverts.
I have toothpaste on my.
I love this. No,
I have a feeling because the lighting is changing. I'm by a window and now it's dark. The projection is slowly, like the virtual background is.
It's virtually foreground too. I love it. I love it. No, it's perfect. It's perfect. You're turning into a virtual being. This is exactly what I was talking about, Olbreeze. This is what I meant. You can't deny it's changing everything. It's changing the artist. Look at this.
I take your point about the speed of transferring our ideas to one another, and the number of people that we can reach in that time period is definitely one of the big changes. Definitely like the shocking moment when you just think of how quick that we can do that now.
And so with that speed, I think there's too many opinions that are brewing very quickly that want to be tossed out back into the world without the proper first scrutiny, you know. everybody's social media is like their own news channel.
Yeah.
You're not. So I'd like to think that we are connected and we're sharing, but sometimes it feels like everybody's just trying to enforce their reality.
Right.
It's like my reality is winning because I have all of this news that I can sort of regurgitate.
Yeah.
You know, so and then incidentally enough, we're living at a time where our journalists or journalism is under threat, right? I think part of it is because we're undermining it by pretending to be journalists without doing the work that journalists actually do. So, you know, our social media feeds don't go through screens, you know. It's just simply what we want on there. And if somebody doesn't agree, you cancel them or you erase them or, you know, block them out, or, you know. So we have to think about, think over time, what this means in the context of a kind of larger reality. Right now, there's all of these like reality bubbles that are popping up and they're sort of competing for space.
Yeah.
And some of them are really good, like revisionism. Revisionist history is a really great reality bubble in itself. So we're sort of analyzing with a new lens what happened, particularly during colonialism and how we find ourselves here now. So those are all great things, and they've been made possible because people can now build publications online, and you don't have to go through some of the older channels, which were a little bit more restrictive. Let's say you don't need a recommendation; create a feed, and if the information that you're putting out there is grabbing attention, then it validates that. It's just that we have a lot of bad information that grabs attention too, and probably more bad than good. So the kind of the balancing act, I think, is still taking place. So I thought about those things because generally my work doesn't really reflect directly on kind of social political conditions. I'm influenced by space, which in itself is a kind of, there's a politics about space that's sort of important to me. But you know, it's not dealing with race or feminism or economy or things like that. It's just, you know, it's just dealing with space. And these objects that I chose, it's because they allow me to create geometric forms. Without the geometric forms, they'd be less meaningful. They're meaningful to the viewer because they see photo umbrellas, they see lights, they see tripods, they see something that is struggling to be a robot that fails, right? But to me, they're shapes that allow me to sort of create compositions that I already knew to do as someone who drew in abstract ways, you know. So I was able to kind of build along that way, but in a three-dimensional space. But so this piece, I think I couldn't help not to make it. Not because I didn't want to make it political, but I couldn't help to think about reality as virtual reality, but also the kind of multiple realities that we're projecting today in socio-political paradigms, in socio-political context. And I thought, well, what would these semi-intelligent robots that are struggling to be smart, think of us when we're no longer here? And I think that's sort of where the script for the sort of poem, quote unquote, I wouldn't dare call it a poem, but it's a script of sorts that I wrote. I thought about them thinking about this planet that they're supposedly orbiting around. What has happened to the Earth is like the sentence that comes up a lot, that's spoken by myself and also by Lauren often. It sort of interjects right in the middle of a sequence of sort of scattered sentences that deal more with the robots trying to create alignment, fix something that's not working. You know, and I thought, well, I think that becomes interesting to me because I didn't want to necessarily allude to the fact that we're gone as in we blew ourselves up. We could be gone because maybe we become quantum with this technology. We just leave this planet. And what's left are these satellites, and maybe there's still a little bit of power generated in them. There's still some codes, there's some information, and maybe they want to sort of, you know, they want to they want to connect, they want to communicate, they're trying to figure each other out, and they're struggling to do that. I think the struggle component was really, really important. But I also, there was something really quirky that actually inspired the video projections. I just want to say that, and this is, I think, the beauty of working with this format is you go in with what you know, but you have to allow for things to happen and not even force the things. You know, you can't even force serendipity. Serendipity just got to happen. And if it doesn't, then, you know, so be it. So at one point I was trying to turn on all of the projectors. And for the first time, I actually became really curious about the sort of opening frame of a projector where it's looking for a signal. You know, I thought I was going to impose these kinds of images and I have a technique that I use when I go in, I photograph these things, I create videos. Suddenly I became really interested in just the language of the projectors, the idea of the signal, of the component, some of the graphics that are kind of cute now, with they look like little apps that show up on the projector's screen before you insert a file that it can actually read. So, so that basic language became really interesting. I started playing off of that. I said, this is actually good. The projector screen itself, which is something I always bypassed because I wanted the projector to be not just a piece of technology, but like an artistic statement in itself. And in this work, I realized that it could be an artistic statement just by being itself, you know, by turning itself on, and it gives out this blue light and it's looking for a component or computer too. So these little words started sort of reverberating in my brain, and I allowed me to kind of create a sort of script from which both Lauren and I read from, and created this sort of audio component and tried to give these guys a life. There's also a rebel, component number 5, which is the one that would, I think Tim has mapped it so that if you land on it, you can hear Lauren's voice. I thought that these guys, these robots, in an attempt to communicate among each other and make sense to one another, at some point they're looking for a hierarchy. They're trying to establish a hierarchical order. Like, this is not working out. Let's have a king, right? Let's have somebody in charge and everybody follows along. And then component number 5 is not having it. Component number 5 is saying, nope, we're not going there. We're not going to have a king. I'm not with it. And so the status of that component is rebellious, right? So what that meant to me is it's a joke, but it's also about the sort of self-portrait, the way I see myself in this work, because it's ultimately constructed with materials that are not random. I've worked as a commercial photographer, so a lot of the equipment is photographic in nature. I've worked with projectors even to create paintings, sort of in the realm of photorealism. So I've tried all of those things. So a lot of these materials are really materials that are inherent to my studio practice, so they become a kind of self-portrait, but one where I can remove my face and try to see myself as like this entity that's trying to understand humans. Because I still, like, as a human, I don't understand humans sometimes. I don't understand where they're coming from, their ideas, why they do certain things, why is there still violence, why are there still paradigms of slavery, you know. And I'm not the only one asking. Everybody's asking these questions in one way or another.
What's interesting about this piece and the way that it exists right now is that it does not reference human beings at all. I mean, I guess you could say there are certain aspects of it that are figurative, or that you could superimpose a concept of a human figure. But this piece is right now sitting on the 3rd floor of a building that's closed off to the public, West Hall. It's sitting in a dark gallery. The real piece, the real one that you could find with Google Maps on 400 Paramus Road in Paramus, New Jersey. But it's as lonely a place as there could be right now. And it's completely suggested by even this virtual space that we've now activated by being here and being in the online version, but it's one that is completely devoid of human beings, which I think is like the interesting part of our crafting technologies that will ultimately outlive us. I think we're in the process of doing that. We've already sent the Voyager crafts off. They're beyond the galaxy. Whenever their little power plants will go dead, they're no longer responding. They may be found someday, but it's this piece of technology that's just sort of wandering the universe. And just as the suggestion of these satellites, these sort of ephemeral, they sort of remind me of parasols, actually. The kind of thing that would protect a child in the monsoon, in South Asia. But it's the same kind of geometric figure that is catching sun for creating a power plant for a communication satellite or something like that. But ultimately, there are these displays of technology that are without human beings, that exist on their own in their own little virtual time space. And I find it existential. I find it also, you could look at it from 2 points of view. You could look at it as a sense of lonely, in the sense of like when, Einstein came, the revelations of relativity and how vast the universe is and how small we are in it, but also in contradiction to that vastness is the ephemeral nature of our lives is just how precious it all is, and I like the fact, Gianluca, that you haven't like superimposed multiple layers of gizmos and technology and VR stuff within the piece itself, because what the piece does is it invites quiet contemplation in its own way. And it invites a relationship from the viewer, and you want to go into this space and just camp out for a while. You just want to hang out for a while and sort of see what the piece has to say to you, as opposed to what you were referencing before. I think the danger in some of the more political forms of art is that they can be heavy-handed, didactic, and so overladen with sort of contemporary sets of meaning that they don't allow for anyone to just sit and be, just to sit and be and imagine. And
I think what might be good with this work is that if you don't know anything about it and you just sort of walk in the gallery and you land on it, maybe it looks like something that has interactive elements. And you're probably wondering, oh, where's the VR set? Where's the headphones? Where's this? Where's that? But at the end of the day, yeah, it's actually kind of oddly static in its own right. And it is meant to be contemplated. What I hope viewers will contemplate with this work, and I hope to be able to do one in the post-pandemic era where audiences can actually experience them, is maybe actually contemplate the projectors, maybe get your ear close to the speaker that's struggling. There's one on the floor to the left, and I had placed it in such a way where you almost like want to dig into the projector to hear Lauren's voice, which is so incredibly distant and sort of muted, and you can see inside the speakers, it's illuminated. You can see some of the schmutz of the technology. And so there's this voice coming from within the projector, which I found to be a kind of human moment as an artist making it. Because again, I try to set myself up maybe for surprises. And with this work, I've on occasion gotten some interesting surprises that then informed maybe the next set of the next approach that I might take with this work. I'm less about the VR experience in that sense, and more about maybe tricking you into thinking that it could be something like that. But then you just have to sit and actually contemplate it as if you're contemplating a quiet painting or quiet sculpture, dynamic, but still quiet. And we don't do enough of that, we know. We have short attention spans, of course. And so, and that attention span is also sometimes a struggle as a teacher communicating that to my students. But going back to what things that outlive us, one of the things I tell my students is just like technology might outlive us, the drawing that you're making for this class that you think is unimportant might potentially outlive you, and a descendant of yours might find them in some attic. That's how great movies actually start. You know, so these things that you're making that seem that seem static and seem like they're not entertaining enough to fit within the realm of visual entertainment as we see it today, which also incorporates art, might be inspiring to someone in the future. And I think that's, you know, we're leaving bits of information for the next generation to sort of puzzle together. So I always like that about art, that it actually outlives us. This particular piece will not outlive me because it's ephemeral, but it sort of lives within the kind of archive of things, you know. And maybe Matterport will continue once we're dead. And so somebody will land on this virtual experience, I don't know. But some photography, some physical photography may actually be generated out of this work. So maybe that'll outlive me.
So Kevin, I'm wondering, I know that Plato believed painting to be the lowest form of art, thought that it was, especially in its role of mimesis or copying reality, thought what a ridiculous thing to do. How do you think Plato would process this piece?
Well, I mean, you're right in that he felt like the highest form of knowledge was a kind of communion with a reality that was beyond what we could see. And so that's one of his reasons, I think, for thinking that something like painting would be such a low form of copying of the real, because it's so many times removed from the idea. Mm-hmm. The idea is more real than the physical thing, and the painting is a copy of the physical thing. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I certainly that is the case, but I think really, you know, when you look a little more deeply at Plato's texts, he was worried about art's ability to stoke the wrong emotions and create characters who would behave in ways that were nefarious and destructive to communities and things like that. So I would think he would always be worried about, there's a sort of element of the Puritan in there, right? Of this, like, you know, we need warning labels on our music, right? You know, this feels like something that he might almost be okay with. So maybe in some ways, you know, what Plato would think about this is best left to Plato. maybe.
Oh, that's unfair question. Yeah. That's true.
No, dare I say it, but I think
I get it.
Might have just gotten something terribly wrong in his assessment of the value of representation. So
that's interesting. Yeah. That's interesting. So he was warning us about things like The Celebrity Apprentice, you know, that something like that, for example, could just go like horribly wrong, creating a character, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and from his perspective, he was worried about works of art that would make people feel outraged about things maybe that they don't need to be, or, you know, especially plays and things like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting.
Well, this has been a great experience, and I'm really grateful to you both for being a part of this celebration of this work and this discussion of the concepts therein. As Gianluca said, this is still a piece in development. We're going to add some more layers to it in the coming weeks. I would like to express my gratitude to the folks in public safety, Marie Jardin, and the people in public safety at Bergen Community College for helping us gain access to West Hall and make this work real. Also, Gianluca, if you, Kira, I think we want to. What is her last name? Your assistant who helped you put together.
Kira helped Kira's helped me in a bunch of projects. I thought she was the perfect person because she sort of, I think she sort of knows where I'm going with it, you know. So yeah.
Yes.
Terrific.
These things are always collaborations by multiple folks that, you know, like just as we don't exist as subjects in our own little isolated, abstracted universe, I don't think there's any such thing, I think particularly now, as artwork that is made by just one isolated artistic genius. Every work of art, I think at this point, is a work of collaboration, and it exists in dialogue with every other work of art. So it's
well, I'm in collaboration with the greatest technology company that there ever was, the U.S. military. This is all possible because of them. The live stream, the cell phone technology,
right.
You know?
The internet, yeah, sure.
The internet. So, you know, as bizarre as that might sound, I think it's more about them. And I want to say this because I think, despite the criticism that I might have for militarization and you know all of that, sometimes we're a little bit persuaded with technology companies that they're sort of leading the way and they're inventing. You know, U.S. military has invented all of it. What we're seeing is the kind of how it's being facilitated in a kind of market by interpreters that are allowed to interpret it. So there's some good things and there's some bad things. You know, maybe they need to slap Zuckerberg on the wrist a little bit harder next time. You know, for allowing you know, for allowing Facebook to get out of hand during you know sort of elections and conspiracy groups and things of that sort. I love me a good conspiracy. So yeah, but I want to thank Kira Stewart more than the U.S. military, though. She really allowed for me to sort of venture with this piece a little bit. She did a lot of the dirty work, I think, behind the scenes. So yeah.
What we have in the background is the live stream from the International Space Station.
Terrific. What a way to end it, right?
Yeah, isn't that cool? So that we added that to the website. Just why not? You know, so joining the group of lonely satellites traveling around the deep dark space. So, well, again, I want to thank you both. I'm really grateful to both of you for being a part of this, and Gallery Bergen will be back April 8th with the opening of our student show. Actually, no, that's the submission deadline for our student show. April 15th, we'll be going live again with a celebration of student artwork from Gallery Bergen, from the Visual and Performing Arts Department. We'll have live stream music. We're going to have artwork of all media and also fashion design. So we'll invite you back for April 15th, the same channels, the same exact feeds on YouTube and Facebook. And again, for Gallery Bergen with Gianluca Bianchino and Kevin Olbrees, we're grateful to have you, and thank you so much for being here. Take good care. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much.
Really, it was a pleasure. Thanks so much.